In the remote, snow-covered reaches of the Altai Mountains near the Mongolian border, an expedition team from the Soviet Academy of Sciences embarked on a classified mission in the winter of 1982. Officially, they were sent to investigate reports of unusual seismic activity and magnetic anomalies in the region, phenomena that had disrupted radio communications in nearby villages. Unofficially, whispers in academic circles claimed the mission had a very different purpose: to investigate an ancient subterranean structure detected by military satellites in 1979. The site had been shielded by a natural rockslide decades earlier, and it took the team nearly 2 weeks to clear the entrance. What they discovered was not a cave in the traditional sense, it was something deliberately constructed. The tunnel walls were unnaturally smooth, as if carved by advanced tools or technologies unknown to any local civilization. No known historical group had ever settled in the region, let alone possessed the capacity for such construction. At a depth of nearly 400 meters, the team reached a sealed door, fused shut by what appeared to be obsidian or volcanic glass. When they breached the barrier using thermal cutters, a wave of static energy surged from the chamber, causing immediate malfunctions in their radios, lights, and data logging equipment. The air turned inexplicably dense, humid despite the freezing temperatures outside. Then, the lights died. Only a few emergency torches remained operational. Inside the chamber was a circular room about 30 feet in diameter. The walls were lined with symbols no linguist on the team could identify. They pulsed, faintly glowing with what one geophysicist described as a kind of dark light, a contradiction in terms that would later become a point of fascination. But the real mystery was the pedestal in the center of the chamber. Made of a black, metallic material not identified in Soviet databases, the pedestal emitted a low-frequency hum that made some of the scientists feel disoriented and nauseated. One researcher likened it to standing next to a silent scream. Two men, Dr. Leonid Voronin and technician Mikhail Petrov, moved closer to examine the object. The moment they did, the humming intensified and the torches flickered violently. Then, in an instant, without sound, without warning, they were gone. Simply gone. There was no flash, no noise, no sign of struggle. Instruments failed to detect any heat signature or trace of movement. The remaining team searched the chamber frantically for hours but found nothing, no signs of collapse, no trapdoors, no plausible explanations. That night, the team voted to retreat and seal the entrance behind them. The surviving members swore confidentiality under threat of military tribunal. All records of the expedition were classified, and the site was erased from maps within a month. But rumors persisted. Decades later, a few declassified documents surfaced in a Russian academic archive. Redacted and fragmentary, they referenced localized gravitational anomalies, non-thermal radiation signatures, and biological exposure effects inconsistent with known substances. Some speculated that the chamber was a containment vault for something not meant to be discovered. Others believed it was a communication device, waiting for activation by entities far beyond our comprehension. Whatever the truth, one detail continues to haunt those who've studied the case. On the pedestal, engraved into its smooth black surface, barely visible in the dim torchlight, was a single symbol. Not part of the ancient glyphs on the walls. Not written in any known language. Just one word. Home. After the Soviet team sealed the chamber and fled, copies of the interior photographs were quietly passed along to a small circle of academic advisors before the documents were officially classified. One such copy landed in the hands of Dr. Elena Marinova, a linguist and comparative mythologist at Lomonosov Moscow State University. She had spent decades studying prehistoric symbols across Siberia, Central Asia, and northern China. What she saw in the chamber stunned her. Etched along the inner walls were a series of recurring images, glyphs that depicted tall, elongated beings floating above the ground, surrounded by dark, glowing halos. Their limbs were long and disproportionate. Their faces were featureless voids. Each figure was positioned in a posture of command, looking down upon much smaller humanoid shapes that knelt before them. But there was something more disturbing. The larger figures weren't just worshipped, they were feared. In one panel, a kneeling human figure was shown being pulled apart by what appeared to be tendrils of shadow extending from one of the floating beings. In another, the entire sky was black, with the beings descending from the clouds, bringing fire and lightning. Some archaeologists initially labeled them gods. But Elena disagreed. These were not deities, she wrote in a confidential letter to a colleague. They were invaders, parasites, something older than gods. She compared the glyphs to cave paintings discovered in the Ural Mountains and even as far west as Romania. Striking similarities appeared, the same stretched figures, the same dark halos, and the same spiral motif, 3 turns inward, ending in a single black dot. That spiral became known among researchers as the Black Sun glyph. What unsettled Eleanor most wasn't the recurring imagery, but the feeling she got when viewing it. "I dream of them now," she told her assistant one night. Not the images, the presence. Soon after, she was removed from the project under unknown circumstances. Some say she was silenced. Others say she went willingly, driven mad by what she believed she'd uncovered. Over the years, rogue scholars and fringe theorists have connected similar symbols to various ancient sites worldwide: Göbekli Tepe, the Nazca Lines, even some Mayan carvings. The same symbols. The same beings. Always appearing in moments of cultural collapse, just before extinction events. Was there a cycle at play? One alternative theory suggests these entities don't come from another planet, but from another state of reality. Not gods, not aliens, but interdimensional organisms feeding off sentient awareness. Ancient warnings carved into stone by cultures already consumed. And if that's true, the chamber in the Altai Mountains may not have been a temple, but a trap. A vault. A prison. Or worse, a beacon. The most chilling discovery came not from the carvings, but from a pattern noticed by a quantum physicist, Dr. Rainer Gorbachev, who reviewed radiation scan data from the chamber in secret. The symbols weren't just decorative, they were mathematically precise. Arranged in a pattern that mimicked waveforms. Signal modulations. A message? And if so, who was it for? As speculation mounted, one researcher in the early 90s, an unnamed source allegedly linked to Russian intelligence, made a single, cryptic comment in an interview that was later leaked online: "We didn't open the door to discover something old, we opened the door because it was calling." The official logs mention unidentifiable electromagnetic interference, and a non-ionizing field that behaves inconsistently with known physics. At the time, none of the scientists could understand what they were dealing with. They chalked it up to a strange form of magnetism or possibly unknown radioactive minerals buried deep in the rock. The chamber was resealed within weeks and labeled Class 3 anomaly, biological risk, but one man didn't let it go. Viktor Lebedev was a young physicist in 1982, part of the peripheral team analyzing field data from the site. After the chamber was sealed and the project buried in secrecy, he continued studying the radiation samples on his own. Quietly. Illegally. Years later, in 2005, when data from CERN's first dark matter field simulations were released to international collaborators, Victor's world came crashing down. Because what CERN had just mapped as a theoretical dark matter signature matched, almost exactly, the same waveforms and frequency spikes recorded from the Altai chamber. Down to the decimal. It was impossible. The Altai readings were taken in 1982, before dark matter was even a serious scientific model, let alone something we could simulate. Victor wasn't just shocked, he was terrified. He reached out to a small circle of physicists, encrypted everything, and sent a detailed comparison to 2 former colleagues in Germany. Within weeks, his home was ransacked, his hard drives taken, and he was warned not to speak further of the data. But a few files survived. And they began circulating in closed science forums, encrypted under the nickname Alt Echo. One folder in particular contained overlapping waveforms, the chamber's anomalous energy signature from 1982, CERN's dark matter simulations from 2005, and a third, from an incident near the Tunguska blast zone, dated 1908. All 3 shared the same irregular periodicity. The same black body decay distortion. The same impossible energy behavior. These weren't coincidences. Someone, or something, had left a fingerprint. And then came the most unnerving part. A mathematical physicist from Switzerland, Dr. Marich Lowen, pointed out something in the Alt Echo files no one else had noticed. When the energy patterns were run through a sonification algorithm, a tool that translates waveforms into audible sound, they produced vocal patterns. Not speech exactly, but breath. Slow, deliberate, rhythmic breathing. It was as if the field was not just emitting energy, but listening. Reacting to human presence. Shifting slightly whenever someone came near. Dark matter, by definition, doesn't interact with the electromagnetic spectrum. It shouldn't emit anything. It shouldn't respond to us. But this was doing both. It had intent. This led a few researchers down a disturbing line of thought. What if this wasn't a passive energy source? What if the chamber didn't contain it, but was feeding it? One fringe theory, proposed in a redacted NATO memo, suggested that the chamber might be older than the mountain range itself. A geological scar left behind from before human history. An artificial structure buried by time, activated only when life forms got too close. And what it emitted wasn't energy. It was consciousness. The kind that didn't belong in our universe. By the time the anomalous energy signature from the Altai chamber was linked to dark matter patterns, the most daring scientists began proposing a theory that most institutions still refuse to touch. What if dark matter isn't just matter? What if it's alive? It's no secret that dark matter makes up more than 80% of the universe's total mass. It's everywhere. Surrounding us. Flowing through our solar system, our planet, even our bodies, without interacting with ordinary matter in any obvious way. Or so we thought. Some theoretical physicists now believe that under certain conditions, like those found in sealed underground chambers or during extreme cosmic events, dark matter might briefly interface with the physical world. And what we see in those moments are what ancient people once described as gods. Think about it, almost every ancient culture speaks of powerful beings who came from the sky, who were shapeless, surrounded by strange light or darkness, who appeared and disappeared, who could possess humans or manipulate nature. In Sumerian texts, they were called Anunnaki. In Vedic tradition, Asuras. In Egypt, Netja. In early Slavic myths, they were the Chur, formless forces that stood behind the forest veil. And in all myths, they shared one trait: they didn't just visit. They watched. There's a growing theory that these beings were not gods in the way we imagine them. Rather, they were projections of a greater, hidden intelligence, entities composed of dark matter that briefly became visible when the conditions were right. Imagine a form of life that exists outside the spectrum of our senses, but can occasionally bleed through into our dimension. And when they do, our minds interpret their presence in ways that make sense to us: beings of divine light, monstrous shadows, whispering voices in caves. This would explain the strange black halos carved into the chamber walls, figures floating, surrounded by distorted light. It would also explain why ancient people built temples and megaliths in magnetic hotspots, or aligned with celestial patterns. They were trying to communicate. Or maybe, trying to protect themselves. But there's more. A declassified UK mod research note from 2009 mentions a term called perceptual displacement. In short, when a dark matter field enters high resonance with organic consciousness, meaning the human brain, reality distorts. People see things that aren't there. Time dilates. Identity dissolves. And this is exactly what happened in the Altai cave. The two missing men weren't found. But their radio logs remain. One repeated the same phrase over and over for 10 minutes: "It's inside the stone. It's not asleep anymore." That's when researchers began connecting dots. What if the gods didn't leave? What if they don't need to move at all? What if dark matter, this invisible ocean all around us, houses an intelligence that only awakens when observed? Not physical in form, but conceptual. Not visitors, but residents. And the chamber? Not a temple. A window. One physicist said it best: "We didn't find a cave. We found a mirror." But we're not the ones looking in. The implications are terrifying. Not just because we might not be alone, but because we never were. We were raised under the eyes of something ancient. Something non-physical. Something that watches, learns, and waits for moments of overlap. And in those moments, it doesn't just enter our world. It changes us. After the Altai cave incident, the entire research operation was shut down within 72 hours. The remaining team members were flown out of the region, separated, and reassigned to classified departments, or simply vanished from public record. No scientific papers. No media reports. Just silence. The cave was resealed with concrete and listed in Soviet archives as a non-viable site. Officially, nothing was found. But unofficially? Something changed. Satellite scans in the decades since have revealed strange magnetic fluctuations not just in the Altai region, but at dozens of ancient sites worldwide. These include the Nazca Plateau, Göbekli Tepe, the Giza Plateau, and submerged ruins near Yonaguni, Japan. All these places are separated by continents, cultures, and millennia, but the anomalies? Identical. Same field distortion, same pattern of dark energy signatures. Same feeling, reported again and again by independent explorers. It feels like something is watching, and that's the recurring theme. Across countless civilizations, from isolated tribes to advanced empires, we find the same architecture, the same iconography, beings without faces, eyes everywhere, carved in stone and inked in myth. Many researchers once thought this was coincidence. Now, fewer believe that. What if these sites weren't religious centers, but interfaces, points where the boundary between visible and invisible thins? What if our ancestors didn't invent gods, they encountered something? And they tried to warn us in the only language they had: stories, symbols, stone. One decrypted journal entry, recovered from a member of the Altai expedition, reads, "We opened a door we didn't know was there. I think it sees us now." There is growing speculation in underground academic circles that the discovery in the cave wasn't unique. It was just the first in modern times that got too close. And the silence that followed? Not protection from panic, but a containment effort. Because the energy observed in that chamber, its behavior, its presence, suggests something chilling. It adapts. It remembers. The more we look into it, the more it looks back. It begins to appear in dreams, in recordings, even in digital noise. That's why some researchers, especially those working in high-sensitivity fields, report a strange pattern. Once they start analyzing the data, their equipment malfunctions. But even worse, their minds start slipping. Sleep becomes erratic. Time loses meaning. And some report seeing the same figure in different places, a tall shape, still, watching from the corner of the room. Always silent. Always there. Eventually, most stop. They abandon the research. Or disappear. And that brings us to the terrifying realization behind this entire story: we are not discovering dark matter. It is discovering us. Not just observing, but responding. Learning how we think, how we fear, what we believe in. Perhaps ancient people worshipped these things because they didn't understand them. But maybe worship was never the goal. Maybe it was a warning. A ritual of containment. Because once you see them, they see you. And they don't forget. So we come to the final truth: we are not alone. We never were. What's out there isn't just beyond the stars. It's beneath us. Around us. Inside us. Waiting for us to open the wrong door.